I'm Tim Shannon. I'm the producer for Strife.
Talk about what your goals were heading into this game.
So we felt like that as the MOBA community grew, that lots of people were looking for added lore and depth to the story of MOBAs, and that thus far mostly MOBA development had focused on game mechanics and graphics and engine, how the engine functioned and that kind of stuff. And so one of the things that we wanted to do, and that when there had been lore, that it had sort of been added after the fact and sort of tacked on to a system that was already in place. And so one of our goals with Strife was to have the two sort of co-evolve together so that we had a world and a story that was developing alongside the game. And so that's really what we've focused on in the development of Strife. The story is that the players are taking part in what's called the Trials of Strife. And the Trials of Strife are where the best warriors in all of the 6 planes have been brought together to train to become sort of a cohesive defense force. We're calling them the Army of Light. And why they're the Army of Light and why these trials have been formed is that if you go back thousands of years into the history of this of the game, everyone lived on this one plane, and they lived under this code that was inscribed on an obelisk in the center of the plane. And eventually they sort of got angry at each other and they fought this huge battle, and eventually they destroyed this obelisk. And the oracles, who are more or less the gods, who had written this code on the obelisk, looked down and were angry that their code was being defied, and so they said, if you can't live with each other, then you have to be split up. And so they created 6 additional planes that were connected to the central plane by portals that they separated all the species and races out into. So right around this time that this gets founded, one of the planes and so how the governmental system for all these different planes is called the Keepers of the Code, who were 6 individuals who had been chosen by the oracles to sort of maintain the code, that they remembered and could understand the code and would have cyclical life, so that when they died, they'd be reborn and they'd keep going, and the new version of them would become fully formed in a very short period of time and would have knowledge of this code. So very shortly after this, one of the planes gets exiled. The portal gets destroyed for being bad. And there's a prophecy within the code of a return of darkness. And it doesn't specify what that return of darkness is, and so there are people who think that the reopening of a portal to this banished plane will bring about this prophecy of a return of darkness. So flash forward a few thousand years, and there's this whole old story that is told constantly about a prophecy, and there's this old portal, and there's no ruins or remains or artifacts for people to hold on to point to, and everyone who has experience of it is dead or a keeper of the code. And so this has sort of gone by the wayside. Most people aren't really concerned about it. And one day the keepers find out that there's an alchemist who's trying to reopen this portal. And so they go to stop him, and he doesn't succeed. And there's doubt over whether he would have actually succeeded or it could actually be done. But just in case, they start the trials that you're taking place in order to prepare this army for what they're seeing as a coming era of darkness.